The media tried to convince you that the Cleveland Browns locker room was on the verge of total collapse. They painted a picture of a bitter, ego-driven war between Deshaun Watson and Shedeur Sanders. Headlines claimed these two couldn't stand to be in the same room, let alone on the same field. But while national TV analysts were chasing clicks, something very different was happening in Miami. Shedeur Sanders just stepped up to the mic and exposed the biggest lie in football right now. Here is what's actually happening inside the Cleveland QB room and why the media gets it totally wrong. For months, the national sports media complex operated from a pre-written playbook, convinced that the shores of Lake Erie were about to play host to the most volatile quarterback battle in recent NFL history. Every morning radio show, televised debate panel, and social media account seemed to feed off the same sensational narrative. Cleveland was a powder keg waiting for a spark. On one side stood Deshaun Watson, a high-priced veteran carrying the heavy weight of an unprecedented contract, a grueling journey back from consecutive Achilles surgeries, and the constant pressure of a fan base that had long since grown impatient with his inability to recapture his former Pro Bowl form. On the other side stood Shedeur Sanders, the charismatic young passer who plummeted into the 5th round of the draft, clawed his way into 7 late-season starts as a rookie, and carried a legendary last name that inherently brought a circus of attention wherever he went. To the outside observer, the chemistry between these two men could only be toxic. It made for irresistible television, a classic generational clash where the desperate veteran would protect his turf at all costs, while the ambitious young challenger attempted to usurp him. The media built this storyline brick by brick, framing every practice rep and passing line through the prism of an existential power struggle. Commentators dissecting OTAs speculated wildly about body language, insisting that every missed throw or cold interaction on the sideline was proof of a deep underlying animosity. They declared that the Browns were fundamentally broken, trapped between paying an astronomical sum to a quarterback who was no longer the undisputed future and managing a young starter eager to prove that 31 NFL franchises made a tragic mistake by passing on him on draft night. The narrative suggested that Cleveland's locker room was actively fracturing into factions, with veterans holding out hope for Watson's experience, while the younger, dynamic receivers leaned towards Sanders' modern swagger. Pundits loudly proclaimed that no locker room could survive 2 high-profile quarterbacks vying for the same starting job without devolving into petty jealousy, backstabbing, and passive-aggressive posturing through the press. This manufactured reality suited the national media perfectly because it provided endless content during the slow summer months leading up to training camp. The story was far too juicy to fact-check. It tapped directly into the long-standing tropes surrounding the Cleveland Browns, a franchise historically plagued by organizational chaos, failed quarterback experiments, and lingering dysfunction. Pundits framed the impending competition under new head coach Todd Monken as an impossible tightrope walk, warning that whoever lost the job would inevitably become a toxic distraction on the bench, silently sabotaging the starter and waiting for the first sign of failure to push their own agenda. Fans were instructed to expect passive-aggressive jabs in press conferences, icy-cold shoulders on the practice field, and a divide so deep that it would derail the entire 2026 season before the team even played a single preseason snap. Yet, this relentless barrage of speculation was built entirely on a foundation of pure fiction, crafted by outsiders who assumed that personal pride and media noise would automatically outweigh professional camaraderie. The talking heads forgot that athletes are not merely characters in a dramatic television script. They are professionals navigating complex careers in an intensely demanding environment. While the media was busy churning out endless debate segments, predicting a catastrophic civil war inside the locker room, neither Watson nor Sanders was reading the script handed to them by the pundits. They were quietly operating under a completely different set of rules, ignoring the noise outside the building and building a foundation that directly contradicted everything the public was being told to believe. The war the media wanted so desperately to cover simply did not exist, and the real story unfolding behind the scenes was about to make every single one of those sensational headlines look utterly foolish. While television producers in New York and sports radio hosts in Cleveland were busily scripting a bitter feud, the reality unfolding under the Florida sun was delivering a massive plot twist. Before mandatory summer minicamp even wrapped up, insiders warned that an unresolved multi-way quarterback competition could break the team apart. The media speculated that if rival passers hosted competing off-season workouts, receivers and running backs would be forced to pick sides, creating deep cliques that would split the locker room down the middle. But Shedeur Sanders had already made a quiet, firm promise during OTAs. There would be no fractured factions, no separate camps, and no forcing teammates to pledge allegiance to one quarterback over another. He made it explicitly clear that the quarterback room was fully connected, communicating constantly, and determined to move as a unified unit rather than a divided collection of individual egos. That promise was put into full effect when Sanders and Deshaun Watson chose to organize and co-host a joint passing camp in Miami, directly confronting the narrative before training camp could even begin. Instead of hiding in separate facilities or training behind closed doors with personal coaches, the two quarterbacks stood side by side on the pristine Florida turf, gathering key pass catchers, including top veteran wideout Jerry Jeudy, explosive speedster Isaiah Bond, Cedric Tillman, Jamari Thrash, Dylan Sampson, and promising young targets like KC Conception and Denzel Boston. The duo turned what the media expected to be a hostile standoff into an intensive, highly collaborative workshop. Day after day, under the blazing southern heat, Watson and Sanders shared the field, taking turns throwing routes, refining timing, and walking receivers through the nuanced installation of head coach Todd Monken's updated offensive scheme. Yet, as impressive as the on-field work was, the most critical breakthroughs happened after the cleats came off and the throwing sessions ended. The two quarterbacks ensured that the week wasn't just about repetition and route trees, it was about building organic, unbreakable camaraderie away from the rigid structure of the team's facility in Berea. They shared meals, spent downtime together, and created an environment filled with genuine laughter, open dialogue, and shared experiences. Sanders later reflected that the bond forged in Miami was truly irreplaceable, noting how special it was to watch a group of high-profile athletes connect on a human level outside the intense pressure cooker of NFL headquarters. The trip proved that the locker room wasn't being forced to choose between two competing leaders. Rather, the entire offensive core was actively aligning behind a shared mission. By the time the Miami workouts concluded, the entire foundation of the media's narrative had been quietly eroded. The images emerging from Florida didn't show two bitter rivals glaring at each other from opposite ends of the field or refusing to interact. They showed a young quarterback and a seasoned veteran working seamlessly together, cheering on their receivers and laying down the groundwork for a cohesive offense. The narrative of a divided team picking sides had vanished into thin air, replaced by an authentic brotherhood built on mutual respect and open communication. While the national media was still polishing its scripts for a summer of chaos, Sanders and Watson had already rewritten the storyline entirely, setting the stage for a camp competition defined not by toxicity, but by total unity. The scene where the national narrative finally came crashing down was not an executive press conference inside a corporate facility, nor was it an orchestrated damage control statement released through official team channels. It happened on a sunny summer afternoon at Brooklyn Memorial Stadium in Brooklyn, Ohio, where over 500 local kids had gathered for Shedeur Sanders' free two-legendary youth football camp. Partnering with the local community, Sanders was surrounded by eager young athletes in bright t-shirts, running drills, snapping photos, and soaking in every moment with the NFL quarterback. But off to the side, a swarm of beat reporters, local TV cameras, and national media members were waiting with bated breath. They had descended upon the field expecting to catch a rising star off guard, hoping to bait the young signal caller into dropping a controversial soundbite or dropping a passive-aggressive hint about his impending battle with Deshaun Watson. The media was practically begging for a spark to ignite their summer debate shows, eager for any sign of friction they could amplify into a headline. Instead of feeding into the frenzy, Shedeur Sanders stepped up to the microphones with a calm, stoic poise that completely disarmed the room. When pressed directly on how he could possibly coexist in a high-stakes, direct competition against Watson without personal envy or division breaking out, Sanders didn't hesitate. He made it explicitly clear that the outside world was inventing a dynamic that simply did not exist inside their meeting rooms. He explained that what the public viewed as an adversarial, cutthroat rivalry was, in reality, a transparent, daily partnership rooted in professional growth. He stated plainly that he and Watson have held the exact same mindset from the moment they became teammates, refusing to allow external speculation or media-generated pressure to dictate how they interact. Sanders looked at the gathering of journalists and offered an unfiltered glimpse into the actual day-to-day culture of the Cleveland quarterback room. He revealed that rather than keeping secrets or guarding their techniques like trade secrets in a desperate attempt to gain an edge, he and Watson maintain a constant two-way dialogue. If Watson executes a subtle mechanic or reads a coverage in a way that catches Shedeur's eye, Shedeur immediately walks up and asks him how he did it. Conversely, if Watson sees something impressive in Shedeur's processing or release, he asks Shedeur for his perspective. It is an ongoing, fluid conversation where information is traded freely, entirely unburdened by fragile egos. Sanders underscored that they are not emotional about things entirely out of their personal control, such as media depth charts, public perception, or executive coaching decisions. Their entire focus is locked exclusively on the daily grind of self-improvement, thriving on the work itself rather than reacting to external commentary. This stark revelation exposed the utter disconnect between internet speculation and actual locker room reality. The national media had built a fantasy world where two quarterbacks were supposed to be glaring at each other across the film room in silence, harboring resentment over reps and starting projections. Sanders dismantled that whole illusion in a single breath, demonstrating that real professional competition does not require toxicity. He highlighted that true elite competitors understand that sharpening one another ultimately elevates the entire football team. By approaching the battle through a lens of mutual mentorship and shared accountability, both quarterbacks ensure that whoever takes the first snap under center in Week 1 will be operating at the absolute peak of their abilities, sharpened by a high-standard environment rather than weakened by internal politics. Beyond the immediate relationship with Watson, Sanders used his platform at the youth camp to articulate a sophisticated understanding of NFL leadership dynamics. He addressed the common trap that trips up many high-profile young quarterbacks entering the league, the mistake of assuming that draft pedigree, family name, or outside popularity automatically endows someone with the right to command a locker room. Sanders noted firmly that you cannot simply walk into a professional environment and dictate orders to veteran men who have bled for the sport for years. Respect in a professional locker room is not given. It is earned meticulously through daily work ethic, humility, consistency, and authentic interpersonal relationships. He explained that building genuine chemistry with teammates takes time, effort, and organic shared experiences, which was precisely why he prioritized organizing the off-season passing sessions in Florida alongside Watson and the team's core offensive weapons. The impact of Sanders' words reverberated far beyond the bounds of Brooklyn, Ohio. By speaking with such measured maturity, candor, and self-awareness, he effectively robbed the media of their favorite talking point, the sensationalist narrative of a divided team picking sides, a bitter veteran sabotaging a rookie, or an arrogant young star disrupting team harmony dissolved in real time. Reporters who had arrived looking for drama were left holding statements about unity, mutual respect, and disciplined preparation. Sanders demonstrated that despite the immense spotlight that has followed him throughout his career, he possesses the veteran-level mental fortitude required to filter out background noise and keep his focus locked entirely on football. Ultimately, the afternoon at the youth camp served as a defining turning point in the public framing of Cleveland's quarterback situation. It forced talking heads and national analysts to confront the fact that their dramatic script had been built on lazy assumptions rather than verified truth. Shedeur Sanders had not only cleared the air regarding his bond with Deshaun Watson, but he had also sent an unequivocal message to the entire league. Cleveland's quarterback room was standing on a foundation of absolute respect, unyielding focus, and zero tolerance for outside distractions. The manufactured war was officially dead, replaced by the sober, compelling reality of two determined passers working in tandem to pull a franchise forward. To understand why the national media was so eager to fabricate a toxic civil war in Cleveland, you have to look past the surface-level sound bites and examine the massive, high-stakes structural shift taking place inside the organization. The fake narrative wasn't created by accident. It was manufactured out of economic and competitive necessity by talking heads who needed an easy villain. The media feeds on friction, and on paper, the Browns presented the ultimate formula for explosive headlines. On one hand, you had Deshaun Watson, representing one of the most polarizing and heavily guaranteed investments in professional sports history, desperate to prove he could still perform at an elite level after years of injury setbacks and public scrutiny. On the other hand, you had Shedeur Sanders, a magnetic fifth-round pick who proved in 7 late-season rookie starts that his arm talent and icy composure belonged on an NFL field, backed by a massive, passionate fanbase that wanted to see him handed the keys to the franchise immediately. To outside commentators, combining those two dynamic personalities under one roof seemed like an absolute recipe for organizational disaster. However, the sensationalized stories conveniently ignored the actual reality taking place inside the front office and on the practice fields in Berea. The Cleveland Browns were not embarking on a chaotic, unguided power struggle. They were quietly conducting a calculated, deliberate roster transition. The arrival of new head coach Todd Monken brought an aggressive, unfiltered offensive philosophy focused on player development, scheme efficiency, and total accountability. Monken didn't walk into the building looking to manage fragile egos or play corporate politics. He immediately declared an open, transparent competition for the starting quarterback spot. The goal was not to protect Watson's contract or force-feed Sanders into the lineup, but to construct a hyper-competitive, modern offense around one of the youngest and most retooled core rosters in the entire league. The financial and strategic stakes driving this decision extend far beyond a simple Week 1 starting assignment. With the Browns holding substantial draft capital and meticulously stocking their depth chart with explosive young playmakers, the performance of the quarterback room in 2026 dictates the entire trajectory of the franchise. If Watson reclaims his former Pro Bowl form within Monken's fast-paced system, the team gains a battle-tested veteran capable of making a deep postseason run. If Shedeur Sanders wins the job outright, he proves that he is the indisputable long-term cornerstone of the franchise, allowing management to dedicate their elite draft picks toward bolstering the surrounding roster rather than searching for a high-priced quarterback in the 2027 NFL draft. This isn't a petty, drama-filled soap opera. It is a critical organizational juncture where the future of a storied football city hangs in the balance. That high-stakes environment is precisely why the media felt forced to sell a narrative of hatred and division. A peaceful, highly professional mentorship between two talented passers working under a unified coaching staff doesn't generate endless morning debate segments or viral social media arguments. Pundits needed a war because conflict sells, and they assumed two ultra-competitive athletes couldn't possibly handle an open battle without trying to undermine one another. But by focusing entirely on trying to stir up personal animosity, the national media completely missed the true story unfolding right in front of them. The real drama in Cleveland was never about backstabbing or personal jealousy. It was about two quarterbacks embracing the intense pressure, holding each other to an elite standard, and preparing to lead a transformed franchise into a brand new era. By publicly dismantling the media's fake quarterback war, Shedeur Sanders did far more than just correct a sensational headline. He took his most decisive step yet towards cementing himself as the undeniable leader of the Cleveland Browns. In the modern NFL, a quarterback's talent on Sunday is only half the equation. The other half is the ability to insulate a franchise from external noise and maintain complete authority over the room. For months, critics wondered whether the young fifth-round pick, despite closing his rookie year with 7 consecutive starts, possessed the internal fortitude to handle a complex, high-pressure environment without creating off-field sideshows. His poise in Ohio provided an emphatic answer. By refusing to take the bait, holding firm alongside Deshaun Watson, and organizing summer workouts that brought the entire offense together, Shedeur set a standard that echoes far beyond the QB room. This unified culture gives new head coach Todd Monken something far more valuable than off-season drama: a clean canvas. Instead of wasting precious training camp reps managing bruised egos or damage-controlling media leaks, Monken can run a pure, merit-based competition focused exclusively on performance, processing speed, and execution. When camp kicks off in Berea, every throw, pre-snap call, and situational drive will be judged solely on merit. Whether it is Watson's veteran experience or Sanders' rapid development in Monken's scheme that earns the week one nod, the entire locker room now operates under the absolute certainty that both passers are pulling in the exact same direction. Ultimately, the media narrative shattered because it fundamentally misunderstood Shedeur Sanders' long-term vision. He isn't interested in winning a petty summer debate or claiming a cheap victory in the press. His sights are set on building a sustainable, winning standard in a city that has waited decades for elite stability. The manufactured drama is officially dead, buried under the weight of transparent communication and genuine work ethic. As training camp begins and the real work unfolds on the field, one truth remains clear. Shedeur Sanders has already silenced his biggest critics off the field, and now he stands ready to let his play make the loudest statement of all.